Thank you so much
You're
for the
very
call.
welcome. You like that other, like if you want to swap, dark chocolate, like
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Hey, how are you? Looking for yourself in the thing, getting ready. Seriously?
yeah. It's like,
That
that's a lot.
is a lot of it. Little presents.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. And just for everyone's awareness, I'm having a few back issues today, so if I have to stand up over there, that's why. Okay. We'll go to the opening prayer memorials. Are there any memorials? Trustee Stanley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I bring a prayer intention of urgent concern to us here tonight that affects all faithful Catholics and Catholic educators in the country. The most fundamental requirement for a religious education is religious freedom, because in order to teach freely, we need to be able to think and speak our beliefs freely. However, this Christmas season, the Federal Liberal Party of Canada, partnering with the Bloc Québécois, is proposing to bring forward serious legislation changes that could strip away all remaining free speech protections and safeguards for religious people under the Criminal Code. Our Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops has just sent an urgent letter in which they state, and I quote, "The removal of this provision risks creating uncertainty for faith communities, clergy, educators, and others who may fear that the expression of traditional moral or doctrinal teachings could be misinterpreted as hate speech and could subject the speaker to proceedings that threaten imprisonment of up to 2 years. Eliminating a clear statutory safeguard will likely therefore have a chilling effect on religious expression," end quote. The letter goes on to write, "For these reasons, we respectfully urge the Government of Canada to ensure Bill C-9 does not remove the religious text defense from the Criminal Code," end quote. The grave concerns that our bishops are raising about the federal government's proposals are also being echoed by the Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council, Independent Jewish Voices, the International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group, and the United Church of Canada. Therefore, I urge all of us here tonight to unite our voices and our prayers with our bishops and other groups to pray that Bill C-9 is not amended as such, so that we as Catholics and indeed all good people of faith can preserve what remains of our freedom of religion and freedom of speech in Canada.
Are there any other memorials? Okay, I'll turn it over to Trustee Guerin.
Thank you, Chair. Student Trustee Rebecca is going to lead us in prayer tonight.
During this second week of Advent, as we wait for the coming birth of Jesus Christ, we turn our hearts to the gift of peace. Please join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Dear Lord, as we journey through this Advent season, we come before you, seeking tranquility that only you can provide. Fill our hearts with your peace, dispelling anxiety and fear. Help us to embrace forgiveness and understanding, fostering harmony within ourselves and with others. May your tranquil presence guide us, bringing harmony to our lives and the world around us. May this peace guide our thoughts, our words, and our decisions as we gather in God's presence today. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Thank you. Moving on to our territory acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather today is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. Moving on to the approval of the agenda, can I get a mover of that motion, please? Trustee Sikora and Trustee Weiler. Do we have consensus? Okay, thank you very much. Moving now to item 1.4, the declaration of pecuniary interest. Is there any from this meeting or a previous meeting? Okay, seeing none. Moving to items 1.5, items for action. items for action arising from the in-camera meeting of Monday, December 8th regarding property matters. Can I get a mover of that motion, please? Trustee Weiler? Trustee Sikora? Trustee Sikora. Okay, consensus? Okay, thank you very much. Moving now to item 3.1, approval of the Board of Trustee minutes from November 24th. Can I get a mover of that motion? Trustee Stanley? Trustee Francis? Do we have consensus? Okay, thank you very much. Moving now to 5.1, EDC bylaw background information for trustees.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just very briefly, we do have a consultant with us today by the name of Jack Amendolia. He is the sector's expert on educational development charges, or as we like to call them, EDCs. The purpose in tonight's presentation is just to provide trustees with general orientation / information about what EDCs are, why we have them in place, why we have a bylaw in place for that, and then what process we need to undertake, because our EDC bylaw is coming to maturity and will need to be renewed in the spring. And so Jennifer has graciously provided some information in the package, which is great. And I think Jack now is going to provide us with a very lively presentation on EDCs. And Jack, if you're good to go, I think we're ready for you.
I am. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that. All good? Everyone can hear me okay? Perfect. Great. So yeah, like was mentioned, the bylaw comes up for expiry. There'll be a lot more involved with this process as we get closer to the spring and closer to actual bylaw renewal. But like one thing we like to do over the past couple of bylaw renewals is just have a really early session with trustees, really to look at tonight almost as the public kickoff to the EDC process, and just provide a little bit of a refresher. These things don't happen every year; they come along every 5 years, so it's nice to provide a little bit of a reminder and refresher to trustees and the public about what it entails, and then also just an opportunity that if there's any questions or any comments or anything trustees want the consultants to know about as we embark and evolve this process, it's a good time to deal with it now rather than at the 11th hour. So a couple of things, to start out, we'll talk quickly about what is an EDC. We have an official definition that says it's a development charge imposed under a bylaw respecting growth-related net education land cost incurred or proposed to be incurred by a school board. But what does that mean? Really, when we think about an EDC, what it is a charge that's levied on new residential development under a premise that new residential development creates a need for certain services. And we work in Ontario under this model over the last 30 years that this new growth should pay for the pressure or the services that it caused. So basically what it means is you take out a building permit because you're building a new home. Premise again is that new home is going to cause some students to come out of it, and to pay for that or to ensure that the school board has schools to deal with those new students coming out of new growth. The EDC is the mechanism that allows you to pay for land for those new schools to be built and for that land to be prepared for new schools to be built. The important kind of distinction there is that it's not new pupil place grants, it's not funding to build new schools or an addition. It's literally to go and buy the land and prepare the land for those new schools. The revenue so when you go and take out a building permit, again, whether it's me taking out a building permit or a developer building a 1,000-unit condo, you take out the building permit, from the municipality. So all the municipalities in your region are where you go and get the building permit. They collect the education development charge on the school board's behalf when they issue the building permit, and then they transfer those funds over to the school board. So like was mentioned at the beginning, there's a couple of things the school board has to do. So if you qualify to impose an education development charge, there's a few things that have to be met before the Board of Trustees are in a position to consider a new bylaw. So the first one, and probably the biggest one, is preparing an education development charge background study. That's where myself, your appraisers all come in to prepare that EDC background study. And the background study is what lays out the assumptions for the new charge. So how much growth is expected? How many students are we going to expect from it? How many schools are we going to need? That all ultimately translates to land values and a rate. So that's the first thing. That background study itself, there's a couple of things that have to happen with it as well. A big one is it has to be approved, or at least the assumptions contained in that background study have to be approved by the Minister of Education before the trustees can consider a new bylaw. In addition, the board has to have two legislated public EDC meetings. So that's in the legislation. You have to do those things, right? So you have to have a background study, has to be approved by the minister. You have to have these two meetings. In addition to that, the background study has to be made available at least 2 weeks before those public meetings. So you have to give the public sufficient time to review that, and notice of those public meetings has to be had. So you can't just, say, yeah, we had public meetings, we didn't tell anybody. You have to provide sufficient notice in newspapers and on the board's website. So once those things are done and those boxes have been checked, the Board of Trustees will be in a position to consider passage of new bylaws. It's these things that we'll be working on over the next several months. So a little bit of again, a refresher, just so we understand the environment we're in with regard to EDCs. So it's going back a little bit now, but 7 years ago, 8 years ago now almost, when the when the existing progressive conservatives first came into power, one thing that they did was because of some pressure from the development community and maybe some lack of understanding of what the EDCs were, they froze rates. They actually suspended the collection of EDCs for a few weeks, but then through some negotiations, they froze EDC rates in 2018 and wanted some time to study them, right? And wanted some time to look at them. So they allowed school boards to pass new bylaws, but they had to be at whatever your rate was on August 31st, 2018. It was frozen at that rate. Later the next year in 2019, I like to call, the thaw to the freeze. So they didn't completely get rid of those frozen rates, but what they did is they implemented legislation that allowed a phase-in of EDC rates with a maximum rate per year. So on the residential side, you can go up by a maximum of $300 over whatever your existing rate was. And on the non-residential side, you can go up by 10 cents over what your existing rate was. So again, it allowed you to slowly start to phase in these rates, but it was subject to a maximum cap, either the $300 or if you hit your proposed rate. But if you didn't hit your proposed rate in 5 years, you under collect what you're supposed to. So if we kind of keep that legislative refresher in mind, it'll make a little bit of sense as we look at what the existing rates are right now. So right now, your board has one education development charge bylaw. It covers your entire jurisdiction, so the whole region of Waterloo. It's applied the same way across the jurisdiction. So whether you take out a building permit in Waterloo or Cambridge or Kitchener, the rate is exactly the same across the jurisdiction. So at the time of renewal in 2021, so as I mentioned, your bylaw is expiring in 2026. It was renewed in 2021. The rates that were calculated back then were $1,049 on the residential side, 43 cents per square foot for non-residential development. And again, those rates were subject to that phase in that we just talked about. And I'll show you a chart in a second that'll sort of make all of this, I think, make it all a little bit clearer. So that bylaw came into force in June with those rates, but subject to a phase in. Then about a year later, and again, we'll have to remember kind of the times a little bit. So this bylaw was implemented just as we were kind of in the throes of the pandemic. During that time, or about a year later, if we think back, I mean, there was significant residential development, a lot of migration outside the GTA into Waterloo region. Your area grew significantly. House prices accelerated significantly. As a result, land values did as well. And the board has an ability through the education development charge to look at that up to once per year, to go back and say, hey, how are our assumptions comparing now compared to when we calculated the background study? And when you did that, we said, you hired appraisers, looked at land values and said, wow, they're really different. So that the EDC has a mechanism that allows you to basically play catch up and say, if the land values have increased, let's redo the bylaw for that year period, and the rates will be better reflect what the market looks like. So that's what the board did in 2022. And you can see in that second from bottom bullet point that as a result of those increased land values, the new rate went from $1,049 per unit all the way up to 1739 per unit. Non-residential went from 43 cents to 72 cents. But again, these new rates were still subject to the phase-in. So hopefully these tables, make more sense of everything I just tried to explain there. But if we look at the top table, that was the table in 2021 when you renewed the bylaw. So your old rates back in 2016 were $653. We renewed the bylaw. The new rate was $1,049 that I just described, but it could only go up by $300 per year. So it went from 653 to 953. And then in year two, it hit the 1,049 maximum rate. Same thing on the non-res, went from 32 to 42. And then in year two, it hit your maximum rate. And if we never amended the bylaw, those would have been the rates for the whole duration of the bylaw. But then in the bottom table, it's what I just said. In 2022, we went in and said, oh, hold on. No, no, no. Based on the land values, the rates aren't these ones up here anymore. They're 1739 and 72. But now we're still allowed to go up by that 300. So instead of you hitting your maximum in year two, you went 953, 1253, and again, up by 300 all the way to year four, where you then hit your maximum new rate of 1739. And again, very similarly on the non-res side, you eventually hit your max rate in year four. So again, you were able to charge more based on land values. It took a little bit longer to hit those maximum rates because of the phase in. And that's where we're at now. So your rates today are these 1739 per residential unit and 72 cents per square foot. And that's important because when we recalculate the rates, when we come back to you in the spring with regard to the proposed rates, and I'm not saying that these are what the rates are going to be, but even if I came back and I said, hey, the new rates are going to be $50,000 per new residential unit, it doesn't matter because you know that in year one, your rate cannot be more than 1739 plus 300 plus 300 in year two. So it's important to keep these in mind because it's going to have a big impact on what the next round of proposed charges are. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And the other thing I wanted to focus on tonight was EDC policies. And one thing that's important for trustees to note is when I talk about EDC policies, it's not like a typical board policy, like it's not a transportation policy or a board policy. They're policies that are contained only within the EDC bylaw itself. And really what they form to do is the legislation gives trustees some purview over some of these policies, and I'll explain what those are. So we just want to go through and explain them now because ultimately staff is going to include these in the final staff report and staff recommendation when you're to consider a new bylaw in the spring. So we want to make sure that trustees are aware of it. They may be asked questions, perhaps constituents may come to them. So we just wanted to spend a couple of minutes tonight going through them and ensuring that they're clear. And if there's any questions, there's an opportunity to ask about them. Okay, so the first one that we're going to talk about is, and sometimes this seems obvious, but the first one is of the education development charge dollars that you're supposed to collect. How much do we want to collect through this EDC bylaw? And again, as your economic consultant, my answer to trustees is typically we want to collect all of it, right? We want to collect 100% of what we're supposed to collect, and that's how I calculate the charge, is to collect all of it. But the important thing to note is there's certain exemptions. Some exemptions are legislated. You have to do it. That's a good thing. We calculate that into the charge so you don't lose any revenue for those statutory exemptions. But the board also has the prerogative to implement any exemption really that they want, which would be a voluntary or a non-statutory exemption. The thing that's important for trustees to be aware of is any voluntary or non-statutory exemption you grant, that's going to be a direct revenue loss to the board. So I always try to give a really, simple and at least funny in my mind example where let's say we just wanted to exempt like every house that had a red door, right? And we just said, I don't know, we don't want red door houses to pay. We don't think it's fair. And then I came to you and I said, that's fine. That's your prerogative to do that. But hey, Board of Trustees, red door houses are going to account for $1 million of the EDC revenue. So you're allowed to do that, but we have to come up with $1 million. And in the EDC mechanism, that could be hard, right? It's not like you can just go and grab it from somewhere else. So again, it's not to say that you can't grant exemptions. We're going to come back to you. Your staff is going to come back to you with everything we've heard from stakeholders, right? And sort of let you know from my end what those economic or financial impacts might be. But we just wanted to be sort of clear tonight about what those differences are. And a lot of times too, I think this is an important one is the people who pay these things typically, who take out permits, are largely developers and development organizations. And right now, there are inconsistencies between how the Development Charge Act is applied and how the Education Development Charge and these guidelines are applied. So a lot of times, people are going to the permit counter and saying, well, hold on, I'm an exempt and I don't have to pay the municipal one, but I do have to pay the education development charge one. And the answer sometimes is yes. And we've talked to the government about, trying to look at these inconsistencies, but the reality right now is those inconsistencies exist. So again, just wanted that to be clear for everybody. The other main policy that we talk about, I mentioned this at the very beginning, your EDC bylaw is the same as your jurisdiction. Region of Waterloo is your jurisdiction. The bylaw applies to the entire thing, and applies the same way and the same rate across the entire jurisdiction. The legislation allows school boards to have area-specific bylaws if they so choose. So if you wanted to have a different bylaw for every municipality, or if you wanted to have a North City, you can slice and dice the board any way you wanted to if you wanted to have a bunch of area-specific bylaws. Not a lot exist. Couple very unique circumstances across the whole province. Really, the rationale why they don't exist is that the boards provide services on a jurisdiction-wide basis and try to do that in an equitable manner, and I think tend to look at the EDC in a similar way. The other important part of the area specific equation is if you had, let's say, an area specific bylaw per municipality, any money that you ever collected under that area specific bylaw can only be used in that area specific bylaw area. So let's say in the future we had area specific bylaws and we projected all the growth to be in the northern municipalities and it ended up somewhere else. Well, the problem would be is all the money that you collected through those EDCs would have been in the northern municipalities and stranded there. So a jurisdiction-wide bylaw, the reason most boards apply it and use it that way is allows them the flexibility to evolve and move with growth. So your boards is jurisdiction-wide. The vast majority of bylaws in the province are consistent with that. The other main policy part is residential and non-residential. So I mentioned again at the beginning that you have a residential charge that's applied to residential development. You have a charge that's applied to non-residential development as well. The legislation allows school boards to allocate up to 40% of their costs towards non-residential development. The average around the province is 10%. It's not really based on anything. It's just based on historical discussions with stakeholders, and it's unique from jurisdiction to jurisdiction based on those discussions. There's boards I work with that have 0% non-residential. There's boards that have high 20s, I think maybe into the 30s. Your board is around 20%. Again, that seems to be a reasonable rate based on feedback we've gotten historically from stakeholders. But if there's any change in that or we hear something different, obviously we would come back to Board of Trustees with that feedback and input. And then I think the last one I wanted to go over is uniform rate versus differentiated rate. So what this one means is that when you go and take out a building permit to build a new house, you have to tell them, am I building a single family home? Am I building a townhouse? Am I building an apartment or a condo? And in municipal development charges, most, and maybe all, but most, the vast majority are applied differently depending on the type of unit you're building. And the rationale behind that is that a single family home is going to place more of a need for services like sewer and water than an apartment might be. So they were all charged different rates. Back when EDCs were first created, the legislation didn't even allow or contemplate a school board to charge different rates. However, way back in 2002, they did change the legislation to allow the school board of trustees to make that policy decision to decide on a differentiated rate. Since that change got made, every single bylaw in Ontario has remained uniformly charged. There's no differentiated rates as far as I'm aware of right now, and that is consistent with your board's bylaw. Again, something that we may start to hear from in terms of the development community as more and more high density units are built. There might be a willingness, I think, to see some differentiation, but again, we will let trustees and the board know when we go through that public engagement process. So to finish off, in terms of what's next, it's a lot of what I talked about at the beginning. It's working on the background study, working on enrollment projections, residential forecasts. Land qualified appraisers have looked at land values across the jurisdiction, so that's in process of being finalized. Then once all sort of the technical aspect is done, we go into our engagement phase, talk to stakeholders, do our public meetings, and then again, with assuming everything goes great, we'll be back in the spring and hopefully put the board of trustees in a position to consider new bylaws. So I will stop there, and if there's any comments or questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you. Are there questions from trustees? Trustee Phillips?
Thank you, Jack, very much for your presentation. We have resolutions that we're going to be bringing forward in our next convention, and I'm wondering if there's any way that you could reach out to me in regards to some of the ways that trustees can help advocate for streamlining permits to permit approvals to get them approved faster, because I know that is a big challenge for our board. And I think that something that would help, but getting some extra information of some of the challenges that you're having and providing them to me and any other trustees who want to join me on this endeavor would be wonderful, because I'd love to advocate for that. And I think it's something that we all should advocate for to make sure that all the children have the education they need and not in overcrowded classrooms.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to work with Jennifer and see what we can do and get back to you on that.
Thank you very much. And just in case you don't know who's speaking, this is Marissa Phillips. So yeah, if you send me that information and any other trustees who are involved, who would like to get involved in this, I'd be glad to work with them. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, any other questions from trustees? Trustee Karen?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your presentation, Jack. You mentioned there are certain exemptions that would result in collecting less than 100%. What is the nature of some of those exemptions?
Thank you for the question. So there's exemptions that are statutory where it would not result in a revenue loss. So an example of a statutory exemption is something like intensification. If you, let's say you have a single family home and you can build up to 2 more units in that single family home. So let's say you turn it into a triplex. Those units or those building permits would be exempt from paying an EDC. So that would be an example of a statutory one, no revenue loss. In terms of a non-statutory one, I think the one that we hear about the most right now is probably, something like affordable housing or not-for-profit housing. And that's consistent with the example I gave. There's a lot of exemptions now for those types of units in the development charge legislation, but not consistent with the education development charge legislation. So that would be probably a huge example of what a non-statutory exemption might be. The hard part is, and this is something we've talked with staff about, is getting some numbers back to the trustees to have an idea of what are we talking about in terms of something like that. Like if we exempted not-for-profit or affordable housing, are we talking about 50 units? Are we talking about thousands of units? So then you have a better idea of what sort of that financial impact could be.
from trustees? Trustee Sakura?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I guess my question is in a sense more on the other side of when the accumulated EDCs are put in. So how is the EDC factored into land purchase, say, for example, for the Southeast Galt School where it's a joint school, and also instances where we have a partner that's going to be sharing the building, like I know we have at two of our secondary schools. How does that work?
Do you want me to take that? Oh, yeah. Thanks, Jennifer. Go ahead.
I'll speak specifically to the example raised with regards to the Southeast Galt School. Both boards had eligibility determined through the bylaw. And so we pursued that purchase jointly and proportionally funded our purchase from our respective EDC accounts. So in that case, neither board bore 100%. They relatively bore their 100%, and we split the purchase price that way based on the size of the site and our respective capacity that was being constructed. With regards to the other partnership examples that you've raised, so in the case of those high schools, they were acquired and developed before our EDCs, I believe, if not very early days on those. Certainly St. Benedict was prior to EDC. St. Mary's was right around the time, but I can't recall the specifics of the acquisition. Rosenberg was 100% eligible and purchased by the board. And then of course, we've had the capital contributions from the city of Kitchener in that example. But anytime that we're looking at those purchases, we're looking at them from the perspective of what does the background study eligibility determine? The board is eligible to purchase with education development charges. And then there may be some proportion that is not EDC eligible, in which case we would be making application to the province for the land priorities to make up that difference, because there's no other opportunity for the board to fund that purchase in the absence of that eligibility.
Trustee Stanley?
Since we're talking about the public board, where are they on the timeline of updating their EDCs? Is their EDC lower or higher than ours right now? And to what degree will it affect our decision and recommendation from staff?
Perhaps, Jack, I'll just step in quickly on this one. Through the chair, we are running this process in parallel. We have historically always worked very closely with our public board partners to advance the background study in concert with one another. And so the work that Jack is undertaking on our behalf is also being undertaken in parallel with the public board. We are, through this process, this 5-year review cycle, going to pursue our meetings independently, but we have had a practice where we've even done joint meetings, but that's not how we're proceeding this time. But we're running the process basically in tandem such that our decision-making is running consistently timeline-wise with the public board.
Trustee Weiler?
Thank you for the presentation, Jack, and maybe Jennifer, through you. Do you have a sense of how EDC charges are funding land purchases today? Like in terms, is it 50% and then we have to go for land priorities funding? Is it 60%? Or I'm just wondering in terms of a gauge, our current rate that we're obviously going to look at in the spring, what's the sense of what it's covering today? Is that a hard question?
Through the chair, I think it's a little bit of a multifaceted question. So there's the eligibility, and that is the work that Jack and his team are doing, looking at regional growth projections and reconciling what the net growth related pupil place need is. So how many new pupil places are required in order to meet the growth of the board over the next 15 years. That determines what our eligibility is for any specific site based on how much growth is occurring. However, collection and the ultimate purchase price of those sites may not always match, in which case the board does have some borrowing that it sometimes has to do in order to make up that gap. But this intent is that we are getting to the point of recovering the expense by collecting the charge over time. And Jack, I invite you to sort of expand on that if there's anything further to add.
No, I think that that's exactly it. Maybe the only thing quickly is like if we think about, a new school site in a, greenfield type subdivision, in my experience, typically, close to 100% of that school site is usually funded through EDCs because the test is, where are those students coming from? And if those students are coming from new residential growth, like that new subdivision, for example, then most of the EDC costs would be, or most of the land costs are usually EDC eligible.
Okay, not seeing any. Oh, one more question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To some extent, following on Trustee Wander's question, I actually had a look at the regulation, and it seems as though the I guess allowed space, let's call it, for a school is based upon the size, projected student population in there. So, do we ever encounter situations where the ministry is trying to reduce the size of the lots that we're trying to purchase?
Through the chair. Trustee Sikora, you're referring to the generally 1 acre per for 100 pupil place standard that's in the regulation. And we don't generally encounter challenges from the province per se, but where we run into interesting conversations is often more at the developer level, where our developer friends are always looking to maximize the potential of their property and their interest being the residential development component. Therefore, they're always trying to perhaps squeeze the school sites a little bit. So we have we work very closely to negotiate and ensure that the sites are suitably sized for our purpose. The one thing the regulation doesn't necessarily account for, but there is flexible language, is things like the expectation that we're doing more with accommodating childcare, and childcare technically are not pupil places. So there is the ability for the board to say there are other extenuating circumstances, either by topography of the site, other uses, et cetera, that can allow us to kind of work around that restriction. Anything further, Jack, to add in that regard?
No, just that last piece that there is flexibility built in. Some boards typically, build a little bit higher than what the regulation suggests, but there has to be some background and rationale. There's other boards that, go a little bit lower than the regulation suggests, just because that's sort of the way they've worked it in their jurisdiction. So it's a good guide, but like Jennifer said, there's some flexibility both ways.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I see the benefit of having that was explained around having one standard rate across the entire board. Are there any pockets of the region where the actual land costs would be significantly higher and put us at risk of not having sufficient funds?
You want me to take that one, Jennifer? Yeah. There's definitely, yeah. So I think two ways to answer that. Yes, there are pockets in the jurisdiction where land values are significantly higher than the average, especially if we think about urban pockets around proposed transit corridors. But to me, that's not the risk of not collecting enough, right? Because if there was no cap and there was no phase in, then the EDC mechanism, like we look at those site-specific values and incorporate those into the EDC. So the way it's calculated, it would be fine and it would incorporate those. The real danger is when you start to have those high land values and you're limited in what you can collect because of the cap, that's the danger where there might be some under collection going on.
Is there any provision to tie it to inflation versus land value? Because I know a lot of people are going to hear land value and they're going to get nervous because they think, well, my listed value has gone up such and such, but I'm not taking home any more income. And I'd rather see it tied to the rate of general inflation because that's what I can stay within and that's something I can predict.
So two ways to answer that, I think. The first is there is an escalation factor built into the land values as well. So that's one part of it. But if I'm understanding correctly, not the inflationary part to be used in the calculation, because the calculation, if we, I don't want to spend too much time, but it's really simple, right? It's really just, let's assume how many schools that the board needs based on the projections. And then that chart that was referred to by the other trustee about, if the school's this big, you get this much land. Then to figure out the rate or the price, it's literally just the number of acres times the appraised per acre value. So that there's two real major inputs, the number of acres of land and then that appraised value, and that's what makes up the rate. So yeah, so there's very limited flexibility in using anything else other than those two inputs.
Just to provide one further sort of clarification, relation, and distinction between the Education Development Charges Regulation and the Development Charges Act. The Development Charges Act allows municipalities to tie their rates to a construction price index, which does provide flexibility, and they can do at least once, if not twice a year, adjustments to reflect the construction price index. But as Jack has said, we're allowed to build in an escalation factor at the outset. We're allowed to do an annual review, again, looking at land value, and that's what you've heard from me over your term, is coming back with, is there any reason to adjust the rate based on changes in land value? And we're allowed to do that once a year within the 5-year term of the bylaw.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 5.2, annual report on surpluses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Laura Isaac is making her way to the front. She has two reports to present tonight, the first of which is the annual report on surpluses, and there is one request, I believe, in that report. So I believe Laura will go through the highlights of that report and then outline what the request is and the rationale for that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I am not going to go through all the reserves that are in the report tonight, but I do want to highlight that this is an annual report that we are required to bring forward, as trustees must approve any use of accumulated surpluses or reserves. We use the terms interchangeably, so that's why we're bringing it forward for your information. We do have a number of reserves which we have reviewed with you over the last even just last month when we brought forward the final financial statement amounts. So there are a number of reserves that we have that have built up from prior year surpluses that are set aside for future use. So at this time, I just want to direct your attention to the student support funds of $84,598. These are funds that we receive from the ministry. We have them for the settlement of collective agreements that the ministry agreed to. If they're not fully used in a year, they're set aside for a specific purpose. We have to carry them forward, and we carry them forward through the accumulated surplus. So that's what these funds are. Then we develop a plan with the union groups through our human resource department, and then we enact those plans. So there is a request to use these funds because we have a plan in place to use the remaining 24-25 amounts into 25-26. So at this time, there's no other request for any other funds, but should a need arise during the year, we would bring back another report to ask for additional funds. So at this time, the only recommendation is to be given permission to use the $84,598 from the Student Support Fund surplus to offset related costs.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from trustees? Trustee Phillips.
Just to confirm, what kind of costs are we looking to
So they're very specific. It's for salary and benefits. So generally HR will work with the union groups and we determine which roles will get attached to the funding. That's only a small portion of the funds that we do receive from the ministry for the student support funds. That just happens to be the amount that was carried forward. So there is a larger plan for a larger amount and it's all based in salary and benefits.
And just to follow up, will those funds be enough to cover the funds that are needed? And will there be anything left over? I'm just wondering about what kind of things that those funds cover normally. And the reason why I asked too is because when I hear student support funds, I think of some concerns I've heard in the past from even high achieving students who, they win nationals or something and, they have to have their trip covered or things like that. I'm just wondering what kind of things it normally covers and if there's anything left over that would support that.
So generally, it is for special needs students. So we have EAs that are hired for them. We have some APSP funds, which also have some different sources of funding that are used. So what happens is we do develop a plan. So I don't know the exact number, but we get in the millions of dollars for this specific fund. So HR works with the union groups, each of the union groups, to develop a plan of which salaries will be covered. It is just salaries and benefits for the most part. APSP does have a special clause where they can use it for other things other than salary and benefits. But mostly that's because they don't get as large of amount. So sometimes they use it for resources or those types of things. But generally it is all for salary and benefits. And the reason it doesn't get used up, plan as we may, people go on sick leave, there's vacancies, that sort of thing. So that's really the only reason we have funds to carry forward, because once we've decided that it's, say, for 10 EAs, we have to use it for those 10 EAs. So we can't reallocate it without having a discussion with the union. And we generally don't do that mid-year as the staff is already in place.
Thank you for that.
Are there any other questions from trustees? Okay. Seeing none. So there is a request, recommendation that we need to put forward for that the CEO be given permission to use up to 84,598 from the Student Support Fund surplus to offset related costs. Can I get a mover of that motion? Trustee Phillips and Trustee Sikora, do we have consensus? Okay. Thank you very much. Motion passes. Moving now to item 5.3, revised estimates report, interim financial report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The revised estimates, as trustees may recall, is simply exactly as it's described. So we amend our budget based on an actual count of students as of October 31st, based on looking at things like pupil-teacher ratios and other contractual requirements. So there are some adjustments required to the budget. There isn't a big fancy presentation like we typically do each June. We try to have this a little more concise, and you'll see in your board report, there's a couple of tables of financial information and the dashboard as well. So I think Laura's going to go through some of the major changes that we've made in order to rebalance the budget. And then after, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. So we are bringing forward a balanced budget. So the same as estimates. So we have been able to balance the budget, and I'll just go over the highlights of it. So our enrollment, as Carrie brought forward last month, our enrollment has decreased by 532 day school students. So that is most of our core education funding comes from enrollment. We are seeing a small uptick in international students, but they're fee paying students. Our staffing, we've adjusted the teacher line for reduced enrollment. School administration also has an impact of student enrollment as well. And we had delayed some hiring of the VPs that we had thought that we were going to hire for the two new schools just due to timing and better information. Facility services is down 5 staff. These are permanent staff, but they're replaced with supply staff. So this is something that we bring forward frequently because it happens continually. In terms of revenues, our core education grants are down significantly, and that's due to the enrollment decrease as is expected. So overall, for our general operating allocation for core education, we're seeing it down about 4.4 million, which that's partially offset by an increase in Indigenous funding that we had. So we had some carryover funding that we will use in 25-26, and continuing education has some different enrollment and programming changes, so their registrations have increased. So we're seeing increased revenues there. In terms of other revenues, we have amortization, which is offset by depreciation expense. Continuing education, as I mentioned, had some different programming changes and some different increased registration. So these numbers just better reflect the reality that they're seeing at the school. We've decreased interest revenue over what we had at estimates, as well as what we had at the end of the year, just based on trending of when we think, based on the construction costs, really. So the construction of the 2 new schools, and we still haven't received the money from the ministry for the last 2 schools. So it's just timing that cash on hand fluctuates, and that's what our interest is dependent on. So we're hoping that there'll be some upswing, but we've decreased it just to be conservative. Our extended day and international fees we're anticipating increases in those as well, just based on new information and the enrollment that we have for those 2 programs in particular. So it's based on better information than what we obviously have in the spring. In terms of expenditures, we have decreased the total classroom by 1.9 million, and this is largely offset with the teachers and pupil-teacher ratios reductions that we saw. Our PVPs, as I mentioned, we delayed the timing and hiring some of the PVPs for the 2 new schools, as well as we did have some reduced due to enrollment as well. Our Con Ed expenditures have increased due to the offsetting revenue increase for the programming changes that they experienced. School operations and maintenance have decreased we've removed some contingencies and some project deferrals and asset deferral purchases at this time in order to help balance the budget. And our amortization has increased, which is offsetting the construction that we're currently undertaking for the 2 new schools. In terms of our risk assessment, we are still sitting at a 2.11% as a percentage of revenue, which is a good position to be in. So we're still in that 2% range, which keeps us off the minister's radar and assumes that we have enough reserves in place for operating. We are compliant. The revised estimates that we're bringing forward is compliant with the 4 areas that the ministry requires boards to be compliant in. So overall, our revised estimates is down, and there are some areas of risk, as there always are. Monitoring will be key this year to make sure that the contingencies that we have in place and utilities and staffing remain on track. It's difficult to predict, but that's why we do the quarterly reporting, to bring forward information to you, and so that we're constantly looking at it as well. So overall, generally, this would go to the audit committee first, but due to timing, it has come here first. So it will go to the audit committee at the end of January. And then this is brought forward to you for information purposes.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from trustees? Trustee Sikora?
Through you, Madam Chair. You mentioned one of our risks was supply teacher costs and such. Is there any indication that that is increasing, like trending one way from the past? Because I think during the pandemic, it was rather high.
Well, I'll start, and I'll let Carrie jump in just based on what she's seeing. We do review it quite frequently. I think it's always a risk, and I think it's not just limited to our board. I think all boards are still facing the same kind of supply costs that we have, and people going on sick leave. I think, if I'm not misspeaking, Carrie, I think our fall looked pretty good, but we're coming into cold and flu season, so you never really know where our supply costs are going to take us. We do have a healthy supply list currently, but you never know as the year goes on.
I have nothing to add. Laura covered everything beautifully. Thank you.
Any other questions from trustees? Trustee Weiler.
Thank you for the report, Laura. I think it's important to kind of highlight that we're still obviously in terms of enrollment being down from our planning, that we are still quite high above the previous year in terms of enrollment. So I think that's important to kind of position that we still are up a good couple of hundred. 600, I think is on the total, right, with the elementary and high school. It shows that we did fairly good planning on the secondary students. It was obviously the elementary area where we had the biggest sort of variance to planning, although still up almost 350 students from last year. Can you help me understand what goes into some of that planning and why it would have been so sort of such a large variance this year as opposed to previous years?
Sure, I can start it, and if anybody else wants to jump in, they can feel free to jump in. So we do undergo a fairly robust process. We have two enrollment committees, one for elementary and one for secondary. And each group has superintendents, has Jen Passy sits on it as a planner, our internal auditor, finance staff, principals. So we do have quite a well-rounded group for both of them. And we bring forward scenarios. We look at lots of historical information and bring forward different scenarios of what we think will happen, birth rate data. We look at all that kind of information. Sometimes it just misses. We are up, which is you're absolutely correct. And it is important to note that year over year, we still have increased. We just haven't increased at the same levels that we had previously been increasing at. So it is unfortunate, but it's not a perfect science. It is based on the best information that you have at the time, and families make different choices for a variety of reasons, and trying to determine what their rationale might be is definitely a challenge. So we do go through quite a process, and the Budget Advisory Committee is the final group that gets to look at the data, has discussions with the chair of the enrollment committee to discuss it. So we do have lots of discussions, but again, we can't plan for every scenario.
Any other, Trustee Stanley?
Just a quick follow-up comment to looking more broadly than just the budget, which is that the growth challenges that we're facing here in Waterloo, we've seen this year, show that there are additional unexpected costs from enrollment that actually exceeds projections too. Or there are benefits to sometimes reining in excessive growth. So I think that should be noted as well. It's not all a black and white issue. That more students is always a good thing, because we've seen the real costs of that this year, and it's important not to forget that.
Okay, any other questions, trustees? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on then to 5.4, community planning and partnerships.
Thank you. So you may or may not know the speaker that's coming up right now. Her name is Jennifer Passy. We do have a requirement from the province of Ontario to actively solicit partners and partnerships for purposes of sharing space, whether that be through a new build or an addition and or a school that may not be as full as it otherwise should be. So as part of that process, we are required to publicly advertise and have an open house. This meeting is our open house for that, and I'm sure all of the people are online instead of being here that are interested in partnering with the Waterloo Catholic District School Board. So Jennifer is going to outline what spaces may or may not be available, and what the process is for identifying yourself as an organization who's interested in partnering.
Thank you very much. As Shesha's indicated, by ministry guideline and board policy, the board is required to undertake a public meeting, this being tonight's purpose, to share opportunities about potential community partnerships. This is in accordance with the ministry's guideline from 2015 about community planning and partnerships and the board policies and APF listed on the screen. So the principle behind partnerships comes from the overall objective of maximizing the use of school space, having the opportunity to have public partnerships in public space was the objective outlined in 2015. It provides opportunities potentially to have service delivery that benefits our student population. Overall, if we're talking about reusing surplus space, it's maximizing the efficiency of the operation of that space and reducing operating costs by having a partner share those costs, strengthening relationships with our community partners throughout the region, as well as improving service delivery opportunities. At the heart of this, however, is recognize that this is to be of a no-cost solution for the board in terms of maximizing the use of the space. The APF does outline that we are to look at these opportunities with the support of LTAP data. So looking at enrollment trending, facility utilization, and then identifying strategic priorities. There are two different types of opportunities that are outlined in the report and in the guideline. One is surplus space and the other is co-building. For the purposes of surplus space, what we're talking about is largely focused on utilizing underutilized space, empty pupil places in our facilities. Again, to find efficiencies in the operation of those facilities, offset operating. And those are evaluated based on board policy, looking at 200 pupil places and or a combination of less than 70% utilization of schools. We are in a fortunate position where this is not a priority and there are no current opportunities, but to give you a sense of where these opportunities have evolved in the past, the YWKW childcare at St. Paul was accommodated by converting surplus pupil places in around 2018 and made better use of that space. Things have changed. That space, that school is now receiving an addition, but it was an opportunity at the time to house a partnership and make more efficient use of that building. As I said, the other option is the co-building opportunity, and this is the one we're much more familiar with. It allows for joint planning and construction with partners, allows us again to consider integrated services. Although I do highlight childcare, we recognize things have evolved over time. This is a ministry priority. These are ministry funds, but we plan these in partnership with the region of Waterloo, who as the community systems manager does have to say there is viability, there is need, and we need to prioritize together the opportunities to accommodate childcare. But things like the Williamsburg Community Center partnership with the City of Kitchener at Holy Trinity. We talked earlier this evening about the library projects. These are other similar co-build opportunities that with time and the stars aligning in terms of budget availability, these are the types of things that we can plan for and accommodate. So in terms of the future needs and opportunities, the long-term accommodation plan has highlighted these opportunities in the most recent report and in previous years. But the potential for a Kitchener-Waterloo core area school, the next West Rosenberg School, Beaver Creek Meadows, as well as the evolving Dundee secondary plan area, all present opportunities for conversations to start now. And accordingly, we have invited our partners to review the information that we have available to be a part of this evening's meeting, should they have chosen. But the information is there. It is not restricted to this evening only. It is a continuous opportunity and welcoming of those conversations beyond this evening and up to and including the point where we're making application for future capital priorities. Be pleased to take any questions about the material this evening.
Thank you for the presentation. Are there questions from trustees? Okay, not seeing any questions, so thank you very much. Okay. Moving on then to 5.5 CEO's annual report.
Through you, Madam Chair. It's my pleasure to bring forward the CEO's annual report for the 2024-2025 school year. You will see the hard copy at your places that has been printed for you. And I'm just going to take a moment to review some of the information that's provided in the report. Should you have any questions following? So this annual report is always presented at the first official board meeting in December each year in accordance with Section 283 of the Education Act. And the annual report by the Director of Education outlines our progress and achievements throughout the 24-25 school year. This particular report holds significance as it is the culminating of the 3-year multi-year strategic plan and pastoral plan for 2022 to 2025. So foundational documents that have guided our work over the last 3 years, and also which has helped in the preparation of the transition into our new strategic framework for 25 to 2030. So we are characterized by some unique growth over last year. So this is our year at a glance. 28,000, over 28,000 students across, strongly across our system. We had, as last year, 4 new schools underway and 2 opened this fall in 25-26. We also supported over 1,800 summer learners. In faith and community, we had over 100 faith celebrations throughout the school year, $25,000 fundraised by schools for charitable causes. So there's other information included there. Particularly under diversity and inclusion, where we have 115 languages spoken across our schools. Over 500 newcomer students were welcomed last year, and we have 2,311 students in 18 language programs that we're supporting. On innovation and development, over 1,000 staff were trained in generative AI, and we had almost 3,000 podcast listens in our podcast. In adult learning at St. Louis, 409 adult graduates received their Ontario Secondary School Diploma. We had 462 program graduates, over 3,500 adults in ESL and Link, and over almost 3,800 adults in credit programs. And under student support and well-being, we had 1,915 hours of extra student support, 11,500 mental health course visits, 77 sources of strength sessions, and 300 families in Growing Together program. Our next pages highlight our graduation rates. As you can see, our internal graduation rate is calculated differently. And that there's just a diagram there on the right. It's not anything that you haven't seen before, just around what is calculated into the number for our internal rate versus our external rate. So I will, we did our 5-year graduation rate for the 2019-2020 cohort was 91.1%, and that's as of June in 2024. Our 4-year rate is at 85.2%, and we are consistently above provincial average and ahead of many Western Ontario boards in terms of graduation rates. So a little bit of information there just around the how the rate is calculated for the internal rate, which is slightly different than the ministry rate. So moving along, just a little picture there. We'll go on to faith. Last year, we introduced the Blessed and Beloved Religion Family Life Education Program, replacing Fully Alive. It was developed by the Institute for Catholic Education, approved by the Assembly Catholic Bishops of Ontario. Started in grade 1 in 2024 and 2025, expanding to grades 2 and 3 this year. And the program focuses on human dignity, relationships, and family through a Catholic lens. Under innovation, so again, we had many staff that were engaged in AI training throughout webinars, one-on-one support, and workshops. And our resources were accessed over 1,600 times. So a lot of data collected just around access and accessibility for our staff. Again, I'd mentioned about our podcast. So our Deep Learning Dialogues podcast reached nearly 2,800 listeners. and our training embedded into our PA days and ongoing professional development this year. Our esports program is our new whole athlete esports program for grade 6 to 12. That had launched last year. Games included Rocket League, Minecraft, and Mario Kart. It's rooted in Catholic teachings of fostering teamwork, wellness, and digital citizenship. We had hundreds of participants who within that partnership with Conestoga College. Under student leadership, our Project Search Waterloo Region. Our third class of interns began last year at the Waterloo Regional Health Network at Queens Boulevard site, and it was our very first class at the Cambridge Memorial Hospital. It's a 10-month employment preparation program for students with intellectual or development disabilities, and it's in partnership with our board, the REN, the Cambridge Memorial Hospital, and KW Habilitation. So it's a really excellent opportunity. I actually had the pleasure of visiting both programs over the last few weeks. Certainly is an advantage, like an incredible program for our region. And under equity and inclusion, so we had many schools as places where every student feels seen, valued, and supported. And we celebrated our diverse identities, backgrounds, and perspectives. Under the arts, over 1,350 students participated in an expanded folk dance festival. Our musical programs, ukuleles, djembes, and full band ensembles are included under this area. Our drama and dance students led festivals and staged award-winning performances, and visual arts students showcased at Expressions 50 Gallery. Just a little bit of information there around our community partnerships. The YMCA, Settlement Workers in Schools program, continues as a key role. Our census translation and Turgenew language immunization messaging. So lots of expansion to help support our families of different backgrounds and newcomers into our region. Our newcomer youth theater and newcomer orientation week, helping families feel welcomed, feel informed, and feel connected in our school communities. Under excellence in learning, so we had over, again, 500 newcomer students welcomed in the Newcomer Reception Center last year. Initial assessments were done in English and math. Our Lexia pilot for grades 3 to 12 English literacy development learners participated in that. Over 200 co-taught lessons by multilingual support teachers, and enhanced tracking through Aspen and Encompass to support our students. In French, top provincial honors in speaking and writing competitions. 25 secondary schools earned their internationally recognized DELF B1 diploma, while 65 intermediate students engaged in hands-on cultural learning at the French language day camp. Under strengthening numeracy, so WCDSB's elementary math achievement plan delivered results in 24-25 in our 6 priority schools. Targeted coaching reached 165 students and 24 teachers, leading to achievement gains of 20% in grade 3 and 17% in grade 6. Student confidence also soared. 62% of the grade 3s and 53% of the grade 6s now believe I am good at math. Math lead teachers across the board led in-school PD after participating in 8 sessions focused on high-impact strategies, which earning strong praise from our educators. And on literacy, our early literacy, in 24-25, we strengthened early literacy through the rollout of the new screening tool for students in kindergarten, year 2 to grade 2. A total of 5,833 students were screened, with 60% meeting the benchmark. Our 8 literacy special assignment teachers supported the implementation and provided the tier 2 reading intervention to 393 students. Under St. Louis and Adult Learning and Continuing Education Centers, once again, over 16,000 student registrations across the 22 programs and services, offering hope and opportunity to learners of all ages, from infants to childminding to adults pursuing personal, academic, and career goals. Okay, under Building for the Future, Construction began in 2024 on our 2 elementary schools to meet the needs of our growing communities. So we did open St. Patrick Elementary School and Holy Trinity this past school year. And there's the pictures there of when we had broken ground and had the ribbon cutting last year. Under financial stewardship, so led by Superintendent Maharaj, it's proud to reflect on another successful year supporting the planning, development, presentation, and monitoring of the 24-25 school year budget. And there's information just around the budgets that had been presented to you in last year's plan as well. The fiscal year ending in August of 2025 resulted in a small surplus of funds. We assure you that we have utilized those funds now, well taken care of, thanks to our conservative planning, rigorous financial oversight, and ongoing collaboration with budget holders. We continue to maintain a strong and stable financial position. And that is the conclusion of the 24-25 annual CEO's annual report, again, demonstrating our commitment to transparency and accountability, celebrating achievements while acknowledging continued areas for growth as we move forward, and it's a very strong foundation for our new multi-year strategic plan. So I just want to give thanks to our staff, our entire staff, our students, parishes, and community partners, particularly our staff that were committed to putting this information together for this report. Respectfully submitted, and I am looking for approval of the report.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from trustees?
We heard a lot of fantastic partnerships, but can you assure the board that there has not been any effect on the integrity of our Catholic teaching, that it's not being diluted in any way by partnering with organizations that are obviously do not have a Catholic lens, do not have any aspect of that? Do we lose anything? I'm just trying to see both sides of the picture here.
Our partnerships are always, I think that we had discussed that before too. So never is our Catholic values diluted in any way in any of the partnerships that we undertake. So that is a priority for us to maintain the integrity of our Catholic values, our Catholic social teachings, and ensuring that everything that we do is supporting the Ontario Catholic School graduate expectations. So I can assure you of that.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And I hope it continues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from trustees? Trustee Cuff.
So looking at page 10, the faith page, and just looking at those books that are wonderfully on the bottom there, it strikes me that I don't see the children's Bible there at all. And none of these books are particularly faith-filled. Like they might have good messages to them, you know, but what I'm just looking at it from the faith lens and saying, well, how are these actually related to God calls me by my name?
So that particular diagram, that particular picture that was taken was around inclusivity. God calls me by my name. And it looks to me that they have chosen books to support inclusivity. So all are welcome. I am me, understanding myself, who I am as a person. I'm not, Paul, maybe you can speak to this particular image and when it was taken or what.
I can through you, Madam Chair. Each of those books is connected to a Catholic social teaching. So they can, I don't know, I don't have intimate details about each of them because I haven't read each of them, but I have read several of them myself. And I know that each of them in connection with what was put up on there is connected to a Catholic social teaching. So they may not be, as you referred to earlier, Trustee Cuff, related to the Bible per se, but they are connected to a Catholic social teaching. And that was the intent of that lesson and the teachers putting up of God calls me by name. That was where the lesson and where it was rooted and started. And each of those books is connected to a Catholic social teaching in some way, shape, or form.
Trustee Stanley?
Just to follow up, then how are these books different than what you'd find in the public board? How is our approach to Catholic social teaching different than what you find in the public board?
Our approach is rooted in faith, through you, Madam Chair, and I would say that many of these are found in the Catholic board. Lots of Catholic social teachings are applicable universally, and it would be, for us to think that we don't see Catholic social teachings existing outside of a Catholic school board, I think would be misinformed. So you would probably find all of these in a public school board. It doesn't mean they don't speak to Catholic social teachings.
Then just a follow-up question, why should parents put their children in our board different from the public board?
Addition, Trustee Stanley, in addition to Catholic social teachings, we also focus on scripture and the Bible as evidence through the work that we do in growing in faith, growing in Christ. And that would be the difference between the public board and the Catholic board, would be our programming and religion and family life. And so blessed and beloved would be an obvious difference, and growing in faith, growing in Christ was our fundamental and core to what we do. These are supplementary books that can be read and aligned to Catholic social teaching. But the public board does not have growing in faith, growing in Christ, which is the program that we use, nor do they have blessed and beloved, which is brand new family life program. They teach from a curriculum document. We teach from the lens of our faith.
And again, just one more question. How many hours would these programs take for say, an elementary student? How many hours in the classroom are they going to get of these programs in a year?
Great question. So I'll break it down over the course of a week. Teachers teach religion 4 times in a lesson, so a lesson each day. And on the 5th day, they do religion and family life, so a combination of the two. So it's being taught exclusively 5 days a week, 4 of them devoted to growing in faith, growing in Christ, 1 lesson per week devoted to blessed and beloved, the family life program. Thank you.
Trustee Guerin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director, for the report. I think this tells a great story, a lot of successes and accomplishments. What are you seeing are going to be sort of the key priorities as we move from the previous MYSP into the new 5-year one? And will AI be a particular focus for you, or are there other areas?
We've already started to, and I'll speak about that in my next report, just around where we are with regards to our new MYSP, setting on the new goals for this school year and what some of the highlights will be. We're certainly seeing continuation with the work that we are doing in our faith and our family life curriculum. And I know that we have received many updates from the Institute for Catholic Education and just around some of the new curriculum that's going to be coming. So we'll be doing a lot of work in terms of unpacking new curriculum. We have other new curriculum documents that are going to be given to us in the new year that we will be required to also implement. Also, just looking at our most recent EQAO scores. So we'll talk about that in my next report as well, just around the work that needs to be done and unpacked there with regards to how our students are doing and to ensuring that they are getting everything that they need to ensure improvement moving into the next phase. We'll continue our work with graduation rates, of course. That's always important to ensure that we understand the students that are receiving their Ontario Secondary School diploma, setting those goals as well. And so I do see a lot of work in innovation, and I see a lot of work in implementing innovation into the work that we're doing in all areas of the curriculum, because it is certainly an important and ever-changing initiative that needs to be considered in terms of the safety, security, and integrity of our students and their learning. So those are just a few of the highlights, but I certainly like to see the work ongoing with regards to leadership, our Catholic leadership, ensuring that we are preparing leaders for to move into some very critical roles in our organization. And just like I said, I'd like to also be able to continue the work just specifically around future ready skills and pathways as well. There's just some highlights there.
Are there any areas of risk that you see for the board that are going to get particular attention over the next 5 years?
Not, I couldn't answer that off my hand right now. Again, I see, yeah, I would have to give that a little bit of thought, Trustee Guerin. I certainly will. Areas, and I'll be able to bring that forward.
Okay, so there is a request to have an approval here that the board accept this report indicating compliance with our obligations under section 283(3) of the Education Act. Can I get a mover of that motion? Trustee Weiler and Trustee Doherty Masters. Do we have consensus? Okay. Thank you very much. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on then to item 7.1, student trustee report. Sorry. 5.6, director's report.
Through you, Madam Chair, just the director's report for December. Just like to bring forward a few highlights and some information for you. So first of all, with regards to our multi-year strategic plan, we were planning on bringing an update to you today. However, the research department and the work with our senior team have asked for a little bit more time as we're continuing to unpack some of the goals and indicators. It is just reflecting back to our last implementation of our multi-year strategic plan, it did take an entire year to build a dashboard in order to do and complete the data collection. So we are well ahead of that. However, we have the research team has had individualized meetings with each of our senior team and consultants, and really want to get the information right and exactly be able to exactly determine what the indicators should be. We're also really focusing this year on not just quantitative data collection, but really a meaningful focus on some qualitative collection as well. We really want to be able to look not only at the data that supports the information, but the stories of our students, the story of our families, the story just around our work around learning, serving, belonging, with faith at the center of everything that we do. So that right now, so we, again, we are actually meeting with the research team again tomorrow because we have a very ambitious group. So this last multi-year strategic plan, we had 30 indicators, and already now we're going between 25 and 35. So we're really trying to narrow down the work to ensure that what we're doing is very succinct, but also to implement some of those qualitative aspects as well. So I will have the research team will be here in January to present an update at that time. So under learning, I did just a few highlights. It is only December the 8th, so I did write this report a little bit into the future. That will cover the next few weeks of December. December, as you know, is very just a month of celebration, Advent, and preparation for Christ's birth. There's lots of activities that are happening around our board, and I have been invited to many of them to partake. So that's been just a wonderful opportunity to really engage. Around learning, we did have a meeting with the Wilfrid Laurier University Faculty of Education, creating a bit of a partnership with our senior team members. So Superintendent Pomfret, Superintendent Ritzma, and Superintendent Foran and myself attended Wilfrid Laurier University and met with their Faculty of Education and many of members of their faculty team. So an important partnership that we are developing just to help support in the preparation of our teacher candidates, supporting those students in the areas of special education, self-regulation, exploring future developments in teacher education program curriculum. They have a very strong partnership with our school board, many Catholic educators that are coming out of it. And we even talked about the religion programming for our students. And as they take their religion preparation program in religious curriculum, just at the timing of that program to ensure that every single candidate that's interested in teaching in the Catholic board is able to to engage in that programming as well. So it's an incredible partnership. We've had a couple of follow-up emails with some really action items coming out of the work. So we're excited to see where that's going to take us. Grade 8 parent information sessions have been taking place throughout November and December. So they have completed now. So these are the really essential evenings that provide families with that information around program pathways, course selection, specialized programs, everything that we offer to our secondary schools as they move into that very important transition. So those have been very successful. And as far as Advent and our season of December and our sacred season of our liturgical calendar, again, lots of meaningful activities. Our Board of Trustees, we engaged in a spiritual retreat, which I thought was very lovely to be part of that. Also, we had a annual Advent retreat, a conversation in the spirit that I was able to attend as well. And we've been engaging in our weekly Advent prayer gatherings every Tuesday morning here at the CEC in the chapel. We also had our first Friends and Advocates of Catholic Education meeting with our partners around that collaborative, important information around how we're going to be able to advocate and support the voice of Catholic education moving into the future. Was able to attend the St. Mary's High School community dinner. There was probably 300 people there, I imagine, bringing together the close school community to share in a meal and fellowship while serving those in need, witnessing our students' compassion and generosity. They welcomed guests. It was just really wonderful turnout at that event. A couple other highlights. Had a meeting today, Forward Christ Together in Christ. So we are undertaking our pastor principal relationship building activity to its next phase. We did meet in the spring, and our next meeting will be in April. That is our collaboration. So with our full deanery, all of our clergy, our principals, our senior team, we'll be meeting together and just talking about that pastor-principal relationships across our system, really with that intention of focusing that connection with our school leaders and our parish pastors. And under belonging, just a couple of highlights there. Was able to attend the Team Dave documentary screening at the Princess Theatre on December 1st, where we celebrated the award-winning robotics team from St. David's. Really wonderful documentary. It was really wonderful the documentary itself was incredible and created by a former student. And really captured the work and the success of Team Dave. So I don't know if there's an opportunity to see it publicly, but I highly recommend it. It was excellent. Also attended a winter solstice Indigenous lunch at St. Benedict Catholic Secondary School last week. And this Friday, we'll be having our first system collaborative professional team meeting where we bring together representatives from all of our union groups to discuss how the year is progressing, what are the emerging needs that they're hearing out in the school board, and what supports and offer collaboration we can do to help to foster that relationship, ensuring that all voices are being heard and valued. I do continue our work with the MPPs and all of our municipal relations. I had a meeting last Friday with MPP Brian Riddell, and I do have 5 more meetings scheduled for within the next 2 weeks. Just really about the first question always is, what are your thoughts on Catholic education and how can you help support Catholic education moving forward? So we always do have a healthy conversation, and most of it always begins with, my family went to Catholic education, or my family have moved through the system. So there always seems to be quite a bit of support with them amongst our political partners. So it's a really great opportunity to engage in that work. And just looking ahead, again, as we conclude 2025, we carry forward the accomplishments of for the last 4 months, which I can't believe has gone this far. Continuing development around the MYSP certainly is a priority, ensuring that we have a beautiful design coming out. So you'll be able to see that in January as well. That will help support those indicators and our strategic goals moving forward, and remain committed to our mission of educating and nurturing hope in all our learners. Through the work of learning, serving, belonging, and with faith at the center of it all. So just on that note, just want to wish all of you a very blessed Christmas, and thank you for your support over the last 4 months.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from trustees? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much. Moving on then to 7.1 student trustee report.
Good evening, everyone. As I always say, I'm grateful to be here in front of everyone, and I always look forward to this part of our meeting as it's my part of the meeting as well as Rebecca's. This is going to be more of a short and sweet little presentation, as I'm sure most of our student councils and students alike are ready to get on their high horse and go out for the break like I am. So this month in December, the WCDSB secondary schools celebrated Christmas through Spirit Weeks and final assemblies, setting a positive tone for the winter break. We also began our Advent season, which schools are celebrating our faith as a joint community. Some aspects of our Christmas Spirit Weeks, there's a holiday-themed photo booth at Resurrection, St. David's, St. Mary's, and St. Benedict's, in which their mascots are all wearing like Santa Claus attire and students are allowed to get photos. There are candy cane grams sold at St. David's and Resurrection, as well as a candy cane handout at St. Benedict. There's also caroling by the students of St. Benedict, that which I'll be a part of. We are going around period 1 classes in which teachers could sign up for a group of student council members to come in and sing a Christmas carol of their choice. End of year assemblies are being hosted by St. Mary's, St. Benedict's, and Doyle, in which there's going to be a lot of spirit games and activities going on. Doyle had a pretty busy month, not only hosting their winter semi-formal dance themed after the Disney movie Tangled, but they're also having a winter coffee house, allowing submissions for singing, dancing, poetry, and instrumental performance. St. Mary's and Resurrection hosted community dinners. I believe the Resurrection one is actually taking place tonight, with hospitality classes making food for many ends of the school community to come together and enjoy a meal before the holiday break. I wanted to extend an invitation to all trustees. I believe you already were invited to the Descendants musical happening at St. Benedict's on December 11th, 12th, and 13th. This is really a state-of-the-art performance put together by our arts crew, musical crew, and everything coming together. If any of you guys have children, they probably love Descendants as much as the actors do. So if you wanted to bring them along, I'm sure they would love that. Also, our first wide-scale Student Senate event, we have our annual SAC Unity happening this Friday on December 12th, happening all day long. I'll make sure to extend and forward the details to our secretary to make sure that gets out to all of you. This is going to be a full-day spirit event for student councils to come together, network, and learn more about how they can positively orient their student councils, build off of each other, and then maybe bring some more merit and spirit going into second semester. So if you guys would like to attend, you're free to stop by. It's going to be an amazing day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from trustees? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 8.1, OCSDA communications. I don't have anything specific to point out. I've tried to send those out to you as they come up, and they are also provided in that link. Moving on to 8.2, chair of the board. Just listed a few things I've done over the past few weeks since I last did my report. I would call out the trustee spiritual retreat. Really glad that we were able to have that. So thanks very much to David for organizing and for Richard Olson for facilitating that. Any questions from trustees? No. Okay. Moving on then to item 10.1 board policy review. 10.1.1 board policy 002 Ontario Catholic Catholic school graduate expectations. This was assigned to Trustee Phillips for review.
We are in compliance. The only thing I would say, as far as graduate expectations, and I don't know if this is something that we can deal with at our level, but I do think that there needs to be some advocating as trustees in regards to expectations from students and not being too lenient. I know that during COVID, we were a little bit lenient with, handing things in light and so forth, but I think that it might be doing a disservice to students, allowing them to hand in projects on the last day of school and getting full marks. And that's not something at our level. That's something that the government is controlling. So I'm just wondering if that's something we can advocate for. But as far as this policy goes, we are in compliance. I just I don't know if there's something that we can do in as far as advocating for having higher expectations from students to hand things on time and helping the graduation expectations as far as that goes.
Thank you, Trustee Phillips. I don't know, Director Frano, or if any of your team want to respond to that. I don't think there's anything specifically trustees could do, but maybe if there's something that you guys are doing.
So that would be the work of our assessment evaluation committees. So there are what we do is we align ourselves with the Growing Success document, which is an Ontario document that dictates to us essentially how we are to move forward with assessment evaluation of our students. And so in the last few years, there had been a shift that allowed students to be able to have multiple opportunities to be able to demonstrate their learning. And so we are not allowed to to reduce marks for late assignments. So that is in the Growing Success document. That does not allow us to do this. It's not to say that we are not encouraging students to hand in assignments on time. They are the learning skills of the report card will then reflect if students are not responsibly handing in assignments on time, but the grade it doesn't necessarily reflect that, because grades are given based on the most recent, most consistent level of achievement. Therefore, if they are able to demonstrate their learning of the expectations of the course, then they should be receiving the mark that is entitled to them, regardless if they're late or not. The lateness is reflected in the learning skill. So I understand what you're saying around that. We do have a new policy that has just been created by the Secondary Assessment Evaluation Committee. And it does have some provisions in there that allows consistency across the system so that there is still is an opportunity. And Superintendent Eby, I can't remember the exact provision that was put in there around lates. Was it 5%? Yeah, up to 5%, no more than 5%. So there is a deduction, but it's a lower stakes reduction for the students. Yeah.
Just to follow up, if that's okay. I think it's definitely worth a conversation having. I know that you're probably in constant conversation with a Minister of Education. I think it's something that's worth revising because even though we might be helping our students as far as giving them extra time and giving leniency, unfortunately, the world is a very cruel world and they don't give that type of leniency. If you're late, you're late, you get fired. And I want to I definitely, as a trustee, want to set students up for success so that they understand accountability and handing things in on time. I mean, not to age myself, but I remember if every day that I was late on an assignment, I would lose 10% per day. And I think it was quite sufficient. And I mean, I wouldn't, at the end of the day, you'd accept it. It's like, oh, I'm 2 days late, I lose 20%. It is what it is. But I think it teaches students accountability. And I think it's something worth advocating for. I understand during COVID, we had to give a little bit of leniency there, but I think that we should start steering back, because at the end of the day, when kids are starting to, apply for universities and colleges, when they see that students are dropping out at a higher rate, let's say from Catholic schools as an example, they might accept less students from our schools and we're not setting them up for success. So teaching that accountability really does help.
Absolutely. And just on that note, there is a revision for the Growing Success document that the ministry has been working on. So I'm expecting to see something within the school year with regard to that change.
Please update us as soon as
I will do. Thank you. Thanks.
Trustee Stanley.
Just a question that I would like to see if you can find some more information about what happens when students, what usually happens with late assignments as they snowball. So you hand one thing in late and then it affects the next one and then they never get the course stuff done at all. So the way you phrased it that the ministry set out is that as long as they get it all done, the late's besides the point, but it tends to be that the late stuff leads to not getting anything done, or certainly not getting the final assignments done.
It's always very independent of the student. So I think the idea around reducing the stakes, that the consequence of the late, is that the students are coming to us with very different situations that may prevent them from being able to complete an assignment. So it's more focuses around understanding and being able to demonstrate the learning from the expectation versus when they get the assignment done. There still is, like we said, we still have like 5% deduction. So if they are learning that there is a deduction if they're late. But the hope, the work with the educators and the students is to try to determine why are these assignments not being met on time? What can we do to help support you? How can we, we really want to know that information, but it's not to water down, because we will not be setting our students up for success if we're watering down those expectations. And if they're just not required to do anything, then that will, that's not going to help them in the future either. So we certainly are preparing them for that success. And you'll see students that unfortunately will struggle a little bit more than others with that.
Okay, so let's get back to what we were doing here. So Trustee Phillips, you've indicated we're in compliance. So are you willing to move the motion then for that?
I'm willing to move the motion, but only with the commentary that is something that I think that our director should definitely keep the conversation going with our Minister of Education to push for higher standards for across the board for all boards. But as far as our policy goes, we are in compliance.
Can I get a seconder of the motion that we're in compliance? Trustee Cuff? Do we have consensus? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on then to item 10.1.2, board policy to consultation. And this was assigned to Trustee Cuff for review.
So I believe we're in compliance, and since it was last revised in 2023, I don't believe it should go to governance either.
Okay, thank you very much. So can I have you as the mover of that motion then? Yep. We're in compliance, okay. And a seconder, Trustee Stanley. Okay, do we have consensus? Okay, thank you very much. Moving then to 10.1.3, board policy 2, committee principles, that was assigned to Trustee Stanley for review.
So I've reviewed the policy and I believe we are now in compliance. And the policy was last reviewed in February of this year, so I don't think it needs to be reviewed anymore.
Okay, thank you very much. So you will move then that we are in compliance. Okay, can I get a seconder on that? Trustee Weiler, do we have consensus? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on then to 13.1, our upcoming meetings. So I'll just call out the December 17th CEC celebration and Advent Mass at the lunch hour, and I believe the Mass is before that. And then we have our Christmas break coming up fast, and I will pick back up in January with our meetings. I'm gonna just go to 14.1 again, listed there for your information of what's coming up to discuss. So I would just call out there, Trustee Weiler has sent out an email to everyone asking about the OCSTA resolutions. We are going to go over those in the January 12th meeting. So if people could please read that and respond to Trustee Weiler, that would be appreciated so that we're prepared for that meeting. It'll come faster than we think, right? Seems weird talking January 12th, but hey. Oh, Trustee
Just
Stanley.
a quick question, Madam Chair. Has there been any discussions by the OCSTA to possibly delay the meeting until if we're going to hear possibly within the next month about how the role of trustees might be changing, then we might be bringing forward resolutions for stuff that we don't even know what's going to happen. So has there been any discussions behind the scenes about where OCSTA is waiting on in terms of the annual general meeting or anything else?
It's a good question and one that I've asked as well in my mind. It doesn't seem that there's any pause at this point in time. So, I mean, we got that notification last week about the advisory board. Maybe that's all we're going to hear, right? This year. I don't know. Trustee Phillips.
I think it's fair to say that if there are any significant changes that you as a chair would be willing to create an additional meeting to make any changes that need to be made for resolutions, right?
Of course, if something happens in the meantime, we'll certainly make provisions for that. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, let's move on then to 15.1, confirm decisions made tonight.
It was moved by trustee Sikora and seconded by trustee Weiler that the agenda for Monday, December 8th, 2025 be now approved, carried by consensus. It was moved by trustee Weiler and seconded by trustee Sikora that the items for action arising from the in-camera meeting of Monday, December 8th, 2025 regarding property matters be now approved, carried by consensus. It was moved by trustee Stanley and seconded by trustee Francis that the consent agenda, Board of Trustees, and the recommendations contained therein be now approved, carried by consensus. It was moved by trustee Phillips and seconded by trustee Sikora that the CEO be given permission to use up to $84,598 from the Student Support Fund surplus to offset related costs, carried by consensus. It was moved by trustee Weiler and seconded by trustee Jordy Masters that the board accept this report indicating compliance with our obligations under section 283(3) of the Education Act, carried by consensus. It was moved by trustee Phillips and seconded by trustee Cuff that the Board of Trustees reviewed board policy 1002, Ontario Catholic School graduate expectations, and find that the board is in compliance, carried by consensus. It was moved by trustee Cuff and seconded by trustee Stanley that the Board of Trustees reviewed board policy 2005 consultation and find that the board is in compliance, carried by consensus. It was moved by trustee Stanley and seconded by trustee Weiler that the Board of Trustees reviewed board policy 2009 committee principles and find that the board is in compliance, carried by consensus.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving now to our closing prayer. O risen Lord, you've entrusted us with the responsibility to help form a new generation of disciples and apostles through the gift of our Catholic schools. As disciples of Christ, may we educate and nurture hope in all learners to realize their full potential to transform God's world. Our Catholic schools truly be at the heart of the community, fostering success for each, finding a place for all. May we and all whom we lead be discerning believers formed in the Catholic faith community, effective communicators, reflective and creative thinkers, self-directed, responsible lifelong learners, collaborative contributors, caring family members, and responsible citizens. Grant us the wisdom of your Spirit so that we might always be faithful to our responsibilities. Make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay. Now I need a motion to adjourn. Can I get a motion for that? Mover of that motion. Trustee Sikora. Okay. Trustee Francis. Okay, we have consensus. Okay, thank you very much. Wishing everyone Merry Christmas, Happy New Year for those we may not see you.